All right, today we're going to dive into a really fascinating case study. It's the story of how one organization took its EKS environment from total chaos to a state of calm, stable innovation, and they did it using the Istio service mesh. So let's get into how they pulled it off. First, let's set the stage. And I have a feeling this is a situation that might sound painfully familiar to a lot of you. You've done the right thing, right? You've adopted modern tools like Kubernetes on EKS. You're expecting all this cloud-native agility. But instead, what you've got is just constant nagging problems. It turns out that this whole world of distributed microservices creates this incredibly complex web of communication that, well, if you don't have the right tools, it just becomes impossible to manage. And that is exactly where this team found themselves. And this quote from one of their senior engineers, man, it just says it all, doesn't it? We were flying blind. Every day was a new fire. There was no control. It was just reacting all day, every day. They were basically trying to navigate a super complex system with no map, no GPS, and no headlights. This really gets to the heart of the gap they were living in. On the one hand, you have the dream, the promise of cloud-native agility. And on the other, you have the brutal reality of a team that is just completely consumed by constant firefighting. So what were these fires they were putting out? Well, it really boiled down to three big things. First, services would just randomly time out for no obvious reason. Second, they had zero visibility into what was talking to what. It was a total black box. And third, anytime they needed to change how traffic was routed, it was this super complex, manual, and frankly, terrifying process. And the cost of all this chaos to the business was just staggering. Look at this. A full 70% of their engineering time, their smart, expensive, creative engineers, was spent just debugging failures. That left only a tiny 30% for innovation, for building the new stuff that actually moves the business forward. You just can't run a business like that for long. So, faced with this reality, they knew they had to do something different. They formed a hypothesis. What if, they thought, what if we could introduce a dedicated layer, something built specifically to manage all this complexity? This wasn't about finding some kind of magic bullet. It was about strategically testing a tool, the service mesh. So what is a service mesh anyway? You know, the best analogy I've heard is to think of it like this. It's like installing a super sophisticated automated air traffic control system for your app's network. Before, every single service was like a little plane flying on its own, hoping not to run into anything. Now, with a service mesh, you have a system that's guiding all of them, making sure they don't collide and ensuring they all land safely and on time. No, they were smart. They knew that just throwing another big piece of technology at the problem, a big bang implementation, would probably just create even more chaos. So instead, they came up with this really methodical three-wave rollout plan to bring order to their EKS environment. Their plan was so simple but so powerful. Wave 1, establish visibility. Wave 2, enforce security. And Wave 3, automate reliability. First, see what's going on. Second, lock it down. And third, make it resilient. Let's break down each one. Wave 1 was all about one thing, turning the lights on. The main goal was to stop flying blind. You can't fix what you can't see, right? So before they tried to change anything, they focused 100% on just getting a baseline of observability across their entire cluster. And how'd they do it? Well, they deployed the basic Istio sidecar proxies to all of their services. And immediately, these little sidecars started spitting out tons of rich telemetry data, which they then just piped into the monitoring tools they were already using. And suddenly, like magic, they had dashboards and metrics for traffic that was, just hours before, a complete mystery. Okay, so once they could see everything, the next logical step was to secure it. Wave 2 was all about building the guardrails, making sure that every single communication inside that cluster was authenticated, authorized, and encrypted. The core technology they used here is something called MTLS, or Mutual TLS. It sounds complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It just means that before any two services are allowed to talk to each other, they both have to prove who they are. It's kind of like every service having a corporate ID badge that they absolutely have to show before they're allowed in the door. And this is where the power of the service mesh really started to shine. With just a single configuration change in Istio, they enabled MTLS across the entire mesh. Boom, instantly all their internal traffic was encrypted. Then they started layering on some basic rules, policies that say, hey, the front-end service is only allowed to talk to the checkout service, and that's it. So, with the mesh that was now visible and secure, they were ready to move on to the final and most powerful wave, automating reliability. This is the point where they really graduated from being reactive firefighters to proactively preventing failures and, maybe most importantly, deploying new code with total confidence. And the key strategy here is the canary deployment. Instead of the old school cross your fingers and pray, big bang release, Istio allowed them to do something much smarter. They could send just, say, 1% of their live user traffic to the new version of an app. They could watch it, see how it performs in the real world, and if everything looked good, they've gradually, safely rolled out to everybody else. Game changer. So after these 3 waves, what was the actual impact? Did the whole hypothesis pay off? Well, let me tell you, the results were not just positive, they were absolutely transformative. And the best part is, they've got the data to prove it. First up, they saw a massive, and I mean massive, reduction in their overall service error rate. All those random timeouts and weird failures that used to plague them, they were pretty much eliminated because the mesh was now intelligently handling things like retries and load balancing behind the scenes. But this number, this is the one that really blew me away. An 80% reduction in mean time to resolution. Think about what that means. When a problem did happen, that visibility they got back in Wave 1 meant they could find the root cause in minutes, not days. This gave countless hours back to the engineering team. Just incredible. You know, this case study is so much more than just a good story. It's a blueprint. It lays out a clear, repeatable path for any organization out there that's struggling with the exact same kind of complexity in EKS. So if there's one key takeaway, it's this sequence. Don't try to boil the ocean. Start with telemetry. Just get visibility. Then, once you can see everything, layer in your security controls. And only when you have that stable, secure base should you move on to the really advanced, automated stuff, like safe rollouts. See, secure, then automate. And that really brings us to the final question, the one you should be asking yourself. Take a really hard, honest look at your own systems. Is your cloud-native infrastructure actually enabling your team to move faster and to innovate? Or has it accidentally become a complex container that's just holding you back? Something to think about.